sector, but that we're working with you to make sure that we have products out there that truly do protect this nation's future. We're going to make sure that we get it right, and I would point to just my background and my experience in coming to the table and working with folks to come up with solutions that everyone can come out in a situation where you can be successful. Our states and our communities are the backbone of this country. We're a union of states that our founders gave us a constitution that created and gave them the power. The federal government is here to support them and to provide for the nation's defense. And Washington, D.C. does not have all of the answers. We're not here to solve every single person's problems, but we do have a responsibility. And the federal government was created to protect freedom for the states. It wasn't created to take them over. This should be reassuring to all of you because of the flexibility it'll allow you to have in how you interact with us, the candid conversations that we're going to have. When I identified cybersecurity as the next big industry for South Dakota, I had the privilege of working with the president of Dakota State University, Dr. Griffiths, who was phenomenal and had a vision for doubling the size of the school, creating a whole new campus in our largest city, recruiting people from around the world to come in and train the next generation. And now adding programs before I left in quantum computing and being aggressive and what we're doing as far as interacting with AI and training those individuals. We can not only just secure our nation, be educators in what we can do, build partnerships to create new opportunities. So I would ask all of you to not just think about what we haven't done well in the past, but give us a vision for ways that you think that we can be much more efficient and accountable to the people in this country. When CISA was created 6 years ago, it was built to make sure that we were a cybersecurity agency. We didn't have on-the-ground knowledge at that time at what our country needed. We didn't have a lot of resources at that time 6 years ago. But now CISA works in far-flung communities internationally and works with infrastructure systems around the country. We didn't have optimized way to share information back then or people who could implement a lot of methods, but a lot of that has changed. And a lot of this has been put into place now where we have data and information we can use to do some things that really would protect our country better. Alexander Hamilton wrote in the Federalist 70 that a government poorly executed is just bad government. And the reality is that the work of good government is long overdue. We are reviewing funding, we're making adjustments, we're looking at the threats of today and the capabilities that we have, but also what you can provide, and we're preparing for our future. We're focused on not having overlapping technologies. We're going to harness artificial intelligence, standardize the use of advanced encryption to further secure our systems, and we're investing significant resources, which you will see soon in the coming days when the president has his proposal and his budget going forward in our interactions with Congress, that will ensure that America remains the global leader in technology, information, and innovation. We're going to protect those investments and realize that there's long-term benefits to our great nation. DHS is committed to cybersecurity. I'm committed to cybersecurity, as is the president, recognizing it's a national security imperative responsibility that rests on our shoulders. And a national defense comes through a CISA that continues to do its job well, but becomes even more improved and on mission every single day. So thank you for being here, and thank you for helping us make that a reality today. And we're anxious and looking forward to partnering with you. Thank you for letting me be with you today, and may God bless you, and may God continue to bless the great United States of America. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Secretary, for those remarks.
Thank you.
And thank you for coming out to this year's conference to speak. We really appreciate it. If it's okay with you, we'd like to have Dr. Griffiths come out and do a fireside chat. Great, ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Dr. Jose Marie Griffiths, President of Dakota State University.
Good afternoon, Secretary Noem.
Yes,
welcome to my world.
Thank you for facilitating a reunion for all of us.
Yeah, that's great. Do you mind if I take a moment?
Yes,
trying to upstage you or anything, but I really have to thank RSA for their Scholars Program. They have this amazing Scholars Program for university students who can come here. And this is a great opportunity for them, not only to come to this conference sort of one time, but they have lifelong benefits where they interact with the people they meet. So thank you, RSA, for that Scholars Program.
Fantastic.
So.
That's fantastic. Yes.
So, Secretary Noem, we've talked about cybersecurity many, many times over the last 8 years or so. You've emphasized that cybersecurity is really a key component in defending the homeland. Can you elaborate a little bit on your plans for addressing what are, in fact, growing threats to the homeland through attacks on critical infrastructure in particular?
Yeah, the Department of Homeland Security is responsible for 10 of the 16 critical infrastructure components. So we have a lot of responsibility just under our umbrella on what we need to do to provide those resources to really hunt down those bad actors and then to help harden our systems. So we're thinking out of the box on ways that we can partner with private industry, recognizing that the government doesn't do a good job in staying in front of and on top of all of the emerging threats that we constantly face. And it's not just ransomware or malware that's being utilized. Now they're showing and proving that they can hack into our critical infrastructure and control them and shut them down in ways that would cripple this country. Not just cripple this country in how we do commerce or how we talk to each other, but how we even provide sustenance, energy, get food to people. I tell people quite consistently, if you think a pandemic was scary, wait until you go to a grocery store and there's no food on the shelves, and what happens, to the American people and the threats that they face. We've seen in the past where we've had PRC actors go into and break into Assault Typhoon, our telecom systems, and steal personal identity information. But the only reason to break into critical infrastructure, water and utilities, is to prove they can control it. And that is the real threat that we have, is that we have, not a great extensive knowledge right now on how we prevent that from happening into the future. So what I have done specifically at the direction of President Trump is to break down the silos that happen in government so much. Many times CISA was operating in its own little world and wasn't communicating on what we were doing or how we were investing, and we weren't talking to TSA. We weren't using the systems that CBP has. CBP has an incredible amount of information that could be helpful to what we need to do to secure our systems. FEMA has a lot more information as well in how we do that. And then once you get outside the umbrella of DHS, were we working closely with the three-letter agencies, with the FBI, the CIA, with even Interpool? We've had some fantastic conversations and new partnerships we're building on how we work internationally. And then really what I've found is that, and it was confirmed today, that when we do have bad actors, there has to be consequences. There has to be consequences, and the government can do that in a way that maybe private industry can't. We can hold them accountable to make an example of them in a way that would help dissuade that kind of action farther into the future. So those kinds of ideas and information are things that we need from you as well, other areas that we can build on those security functions that the DHS and CISA in particular needs to do.
Madam Secretary, as you were going through a confirmation process, there were a lot of people in Washington and elsewhere, I guess, calling for CISA to be eliminated.
Yes.
You never said that. You always said, no, there's something here. And so I'm assuming that, you're talking about improving communications across silos and so on. Are there other improvements you are wanting to make with CISA to make it more effective?
Well, I think you have to communicate really what CISA does. A lot of people were only hearing about CISA when it was in the news for something bad, right?
Yep.
When it was something during an election, during COVID, when they were deciding what was truth and what wasn't true. Some of the materials I've seen that the agency generated were clearly very inappropriate, not what the mission set was for CISA to be doing. They shouldn't have been involved in that at all. Again, like I said in my speech, it's not tasked with being the Ministry of Truth, it's tasked with being a cybersecurity agency. And so getting it back on mission and making sure that we don't just say that and talk about it differently, but that we're out there talking about what we do and then taking action on it. Rededicating employees towards actually working with private industry to get ahead of those that would wish to undermine us. So repurposing into that. I think that's where a lot of folks have thought, well, this cybersecurity, is it a priority for the Trump administration? It absolutely is. It just didn't like how it got off mission for why it was created. And it needs to get back to doing what this country really needs and the threats that we face in order to not just stay viable and not just to conduct everyday life, but to continue to lead the world.
Yeah. You've heard, I'm sure, many times about the need to, reducing regulation is a priority for the administration, but at the same time, we want some level of we talk about guardrails a lot these days, especially in the AI world. How do you put in appropriate guardrails but still not stifle innovation? I think, the world that we're evolving into with the relationship between cybersecurity, the evolution of AI and its role in cybersecurity and vice versa, is changing everything we do, and it's changing the threat surface and the bad actors, if you like, in terms of the capabilities they're developing as well. So how do we allow innovation to flourish, but at the same time create some kind of guardrails going forward?
Yeah, so the guardrails come forward through working with Congress on feedback from those like you who have spent your life in this world and understand how AI and how technology, how quantum computing and how cybersecurity efforts can be utilized and how it could be utilized against us too. The government is not here to be the answer to everybody's problems. We can put some boundaries there, but it really needs to maintain the flexibility in order for us to be responsive and to stay in front of those who would use it against us as weapons. And that's really what's happening, is that these technologies are being weaponized against us. And so I also believe, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that you've got to give private industry some umbrella of protection that they feel free to share with the government. They have to be able to, because they know where the threats are, they know what they're doing. When they see a new pattern develop, a new software program, or something that specifically was designed to infiltrate and to damage our nation's security, they have to feel as though they have the ability to communicate that with us, and that we can go out and take action on it. I have found that in my job now today, many times I'm the one who gets the responsibility on my shoulders to be the one who's the enforcer or the one who is putting things into place and communicating it, but then also being accountable for it. The country needs to have a government that's willing to do that, but we can't possibly have the resources, nor should we have the resources to provide all the answers and the information. That's where I really think a lot of the folks that are in this room and outside of this room that are in the cybersecurity space need to have some kind of a protection, ability to communicate with us without fear of them, their livelihoods, and all of their employees and their businesses being destroyed because of that.
So in the media, we hear a lot of things. We hear a lot about what's being taken away, what's being eliminated, what's being cancelled, etc. We don't hear very much about plans for the future. Can you talk a little bit about how you would build back again, perhaps in a different way? So that, and how is it different from what's gone in the past?
Well, there's been some discussions on eliminating and some actions taken to eliminate, like CPAC, which was the Critical Infrastructure Partnership Advisory Council, and some of that. But that is because it's being reformed and put in place with something that will bring more people to the table and be much more action-oriented. And that's really what we need to have happen, is to have a diversity of people sitting there giving us action plans on what we can do. How it has been portrayed is not accurate, that things have been eliminated or that it's not a priority. And I would say it's a strong testimony to where this administration's position is, and the fact that you have the Secretary of Homeland Security here at your conference. You have my Deputy Secretary, Troy Edgar, here was here as well. And you also have our nominated CISA Director, which will go forward, and Sean Curran as well, all attending here, and many of the folks that work with CISA every day. So I don't think you've ever seen this much of a contingent attend this conference talking about the importance of cybersecurity, unless it was a priority for this country and a priority for President Trump. So we will continue to do that. We're just doing it in a way that we think will be much more responsive and much more proactive. We've been on the defense so much. After something happens, we evaluate and try to see how we can harden our systems or patch products so that it doesn't happen again. we need to be on the offense, but we need to be on the offense in a way that the country is leading it and allows us to make sure that we're doing it in a wise manner that uses some discernment into how it really gets us into a position to strengthen our posture going forward. And working at it from a viewpoint of national security, not just the technology systems and where they're vulnerable.
Right. You talked a little bit about the relationship between the federal government and industry. Mm-hmm. You've been a two-term governor. Yeah. Do you see a role for the states in
I do. I feel like most of the innovation can happen at the state level. Mm-hmm. You know, I tell people that when I first got elected as governor, the very first briefing I had during the transition, I went to our state capitol. The former governor and his staff sat in a room with me and my transition folks. And I sat down, and the former governor said to me, listen, the very first thing that you need to do is that you need to harden our systems and deal with the cybersecurity issues that we have here in our state. He said, we've got all of our state software programs still on an old server that's been out of date for about 50 years. And he said, and it's going to cost you hundreds of millions of dollars, and we haven't had the money to spend on it, but it needs to be done because we're extremely vulnerable. Now, if you look at all the information that a state holds between all of the social programs, the Medicaid programs, the child care programs, if you look at health information through the public of health, you look at the public safety department, law enforcement, criminal cases, there is millions of endpoints of information that a state holds, and many times states don't have the money to invest in protecting those systems. That's really where CISA can play a big role in helping to support that. And one of the things I referenced in my speech as well is that we can spend a lot of money at the federal government level securing our systems, but if we're interacting and interfacing with those states and cities and letting them feed information into us, you know, we're opening up vulnerabilities to the entire system. So it's in our nation's best interest to work with those states and make that a priority.
So there's sort of layers.
Yes, and I also think that the partnership that we've had, you know, people talk a lot about the state that I'm from as being small and not very many people. And I've always looked at that as an opportunity for us to be nimble. When you're small, you can do things that other states can't do. You can be innovative, and we did some big things while we were there and grew the state substantially. We recruited hundreds of businesses, thousands of people to the state. The state's in a totally different financial position than it was before, and we invested in our students. And we created an opportunity for those that wanted to be in the technology space and to be in the cybersecurity space to get an education right there at home, and from around the world they come to South Dakota for our top-notch education that we provide, and they can have careers right there as well. So that's the vision. I think empowering leaders like you is really what we need to be doing, who know what needs to be done, how to help it get impacted and put on the ground, and help facilitating. And many times, government just needs to get out of your way. Provide the guardrails, but also get out of your way and allow you to do that so that we have a better future.
Oh, yeah, we did do some good things, particularly in the education of future students, and growing the industry, the cybersecurity industry in the state. I wanted to ask you about on the research side, because academic institutions very much, of course, involved in the nation's research, and you recently have closed your science and technology division, as has NASA, as is energy and other entities. You are one of the agencies so far that has put out, this is our future research agenda. This is how we're going to organize our science and technology. Could you talk a little bit about that and the potential relationship with the academic world?
Yeah, that's really where the partnerships can begin. When we don't think we hold all the knowledge and information within the federal government, by streamlining, we build in efficiencies that allow us to partner with you and have the resources to allow you to be the innovation and the think tank, the developer, and the delivery of that kind of science and technology and the research that needs to be done. I have many times, and I would say almost all the time, not found the answers to our country's biggest problems and developments and innovation within a government system. It was always when we were interacting with academia or people who were on the front lines. And when it comes to cyber warfare, espionage campaigns, when it comes to what I need to deal with today in our national security portfolio, Many times the new products that are being developed or the research that's being done is being done with private industry, but also private industry partnering that's already been partnering with you. You've built those relationships and had them there. And that research can then, many times, we have to prove out that it is something worthy of investing in. I tell people consistently, the taxpayer doesn't have a lobbyist most of the times in the room. There's lots of lobbyists that show up for funding. There's lots of people that show up for industries and specific projects and priorities, but many times the average American citizen isn't in the room, and I view that as my responsibility. So if you've proven out through research that something is a viable product that the government could build on and help facilitate, that actually secures our systems or helps us win the technology race, boy, that's incredibly valuable, and that's where we should be putting our resources.
We do see that as a big role for academia. What about international partnerships? Obviously, cybersecurity is an international issue. Can you talk about some of the international partnerships?
Yes, we've been working a lot with building on conversations that need to happen with other countries, especially in regards to companies that are globally located and operate internationally. And many times the networks that connect them in countries that aren't necessarily so friendly, for instance, businesses that may have an executive team or even headquarters in China, but have businesses and locations here in the United States, how do we protect their systems and their government from having access to our information and our commerce and our systems that we interact with as well? So being proactive and building out those types of relationships with not just countries that maybe don't want to share information with us, but those that do, that also do business in that space, and building those relationships on what tools do they use, what authorities do they use, what do we need to build into potentially our reauthorization statutes that will give us more opportunities to protect the information and the data that we have in our critical infrastructure. And then you heard me reference Interpool as well. A lot of what we've found is that many people have information out there and other countries on criminal background information, cases that they've been dealing with some of these cyber crimes as well that we haven't had the information on. And if we can build a partnership to share that type of information, it helps us hold people more accountable as well.
Well, Madam Secretary, I have to tell you, I don't think I've ever told you this story, but when I went to Dakota State University, several people around campus, not the people in computer science or cybersecurity, asked me if I thought cybersecurity was a fad. And my answer was no. I think it's going to be here to stay. And I have to thank you because you've been a champion for cybersecurity ever since I got there, and the first conversations we had, even when you were still in Congress, were very, very important. So I think you are in an important place right now. Your knowledge of cybersecurity, your knowledge of other areas too, but particularly in cybersecurity can be particularly helpful. And so you have the people in this room and out there in the rest of the conference center who can be helpful in this regard. So we thank you for everything that you've done.
Well, thank you. And I would encourage all of you to reach out to us. And Hugh and the RSA team, they all know our contact information. We're going to be asking for your help on short, immediate things that we can be doing that will help us secure our country, but then also longer-term goals and how we develop out products and systems to make sure that we really, truly are providing for the American people a secure country that also does business internationally in a way that protects their identity, protects their information, but also protects our critical infrastructure to make sure that we can continue to live and thrive and survive here in the United States.
And this is just a portion of your overall portfolio, isn't it? Your job is massive.
That is the one thing. Unfortunately, I don't get to just focus on SISA and cybersecurity. We have 23 different components under the Department of Homeland Security, and many of them are needing some attention. Besides immigration, border, there's TSA, FEMA's, Secret Service, we have the Coast Guard, we have INA, USCIS, weapons of mass destruction. So we have a lot of responsibilities and a lot to do, but that's why I'm more than ever convinced that we need everybody to help us be a part of the solution.
Sounds good. And cybersecurity is sort of one of those things that cuts across everything.
It cuts across all of them, absolutely. No matter what area we're in and what part of the government in, or who you're talking to, communicating with, or doing business with, we absolutely have to have secure systems and be trustworthy. We have to be trustworthy, or the American people will not allow us the privilege to continue to work for them.
Okay. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you, everybody, for allowing me to be with you today. Appreciate it.